How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to break down the Flaka and why it's such a fundamental freestyle move that you need in your repertoire. So the first question is, why would you like to learn the Flaka? Well, the Flaka is pretty simple technique-wise once you understand the basic movements of where to place the sail. It's also a very transferable move. So once you learn how to Flaka, other freestyle maneuvers are going to become much more accessible. And it's also pretty stylish, so it's a bit of a crowd pleaser for the guys on the beach. If you're a wave sailor, don't turn off just yet. The Flaka is really useful for learning the tacker. So if you've got flat water, get out there and practice this move. Before we get into the Flaka itself, it's really important that we understand one crucial concept, and that is apparent wind. Like with a lot of freestyle moves, but the Flaka in particular, apparent wind is fundamental to where we throw the sail to initiate the rotation. Apparent wind is the combination of the true wind, so that's the wind direction that you feel when you're stood stationary, and the motion wind, which is the wind that you feel when you're traveling forward. Think about the motion wind as when you stick your head out of a car, you feel a lot of wind in your face. That's caused by your motion forward, and that's exactly what this wind we feel when we're windsurfing is. So the apparent wind is the combination of those two winds, and it forms in that window 90 degrees from the two winds. It's important to know, because it's in a window, the apparent wind can shift and move depending on your speed. The faster you're going, the straighter the apparent wind will go towards the motion wind, and the slower you're going, the more it shifts back towards that true wind. For the Flaka, we are throwing the sail into the apparent wind, and we're using this apparent wind. The biggest misconception with the Flaka is that we're throwing the sail into the wind, the true wind. This is actually not the case. With this in mind, depending on whether you're in a lull or a gust, the apparent wind is going to be changing, so we're never actually going to throw the sail into the same place when we initiate that Flaka. The only other thing you need to know before going into your first Flakas is the Upwind 360. Start by learning in the light winds on a big board to get the technique, and then switch and go to the foot straps and do it from a planing position. I'm not going to go too into the Upwind 360 as it's kind of a whole video in on itself. However, my top tips are, as you're initiating into that rotation and the sail is going forward, to get your weight over the base plate. So your weight on your front leg and your head over the base plate. That's super important, with your backhand further back. Then, as you're coming around, you want to show as little of the sail to the wind as possible. So as you're progressively going round, you should be bringing the sail closer and closer with your back arm while your front arm is still nice and straight. And don't be concerned if the foot of the sail is rubbing against your front. Okay, that's quite normal. And the further we can get around the rotation, the easier it is going to be when we open up that sail. Talking of when we open up that sail, there's going to be a lot of power there. So as soon as that power comes on, you want to shift your weight back and out to counteract it so that you can hopefully sail away. Once you start to get your Upwind 360s dialed in, I would start playing with the angle of which you initiate the sail going forwards into the rotation. The reason being is, this is going to be a great test of your knowledge of the apparent wind, which is going to help you with your Flakas later. Doing everything both ways is also a real must. I would really recommend doing things both sides when you're learning, because this way you're going to hopefully be able to learn your Flakas on both sides, and that's a really important skill depending on the different spots that you sail. Now we've covered both apparent wind and the Upwind 360, it's now time to tackle that Flaka. For the Flaka, we want to be going as fast as possible. Now, I know this might be a little bit nerve-wracking because we're throwing our weight and the sail forwards. However, the reason being is that it means that our apparent wind comes a lot straighter. This means we can throw the sail straighter and forward, which is going to leave our body weight inboard over that center line of the board later on in the rotation, making it much easier to sail away. To get this speed, I want you sailing across the wind or even just slightly off the wind, depending on how windy the day is and how powered up you are. If you're struggling for speed, then go a little bit broader. If you're happy and comfortable and powered up, then you can come a little bit more across the wind. Once you're sailing at speed and feeling comfortable, it's time to spot that piece of chop. Now you're looking for something in front of you and about 45 degrees downwind. Okay, this is the angle that we want to be taking off on a broad reach. Ideally, this piece of chop is going to have a little drop behind it so that we've got plenty of room to throw the sail forward and help initiate that nose into the water. Once you've spotted the piece of chop that you like the look of, you're going to want to bring your weight inboard and forward over your front leg, oversheeting the sail as you do this. I like to keep a little bend in my front leg so that once I do go for that initiation, I can coil up like a spring and explode. Doing this whole motion together is going to flatten the board off, giving you as much speed as possible so that your apparent wind is consistent and you're ready to throw into the Flaka. As you approach that bit of chop, it's time to initiate the rotation. Now, the initiation is 95% of the Flaka, and this is why we were talking about that apparent wind so much before. I want you to think about that piece of chop like the point in the middle of a seesaw. As you take off the point and the piece of chop, you're going to throw that sail forwards, initiating the nose of the board to go down, and this is what we're actually going to pivot and rotate around when we do our Flaka. Because of this, I don't want you to actually jump too much in the Flaka. It's not about what you're doing with the board. Everything in the Flaka comes from the sail. Now the big question, and probably the most important question, is where do we throw that sail? Because we've oversheeted the sail in the preparation for our Flaka, once we release that power, the sail is going to want to follow the path of least resistance. And you guessed it, that's right into the apparent wind. I see a lot of people kind of mapping a clock face in regards to where their board is. But remember that apparent wind is shifting all the time. So I really want you to get used to, as you release that oversheet, to find the path of least resistance and feel where that apparent wind is coming from. Again, this will really help you throughout your whole windsurf career when it comes to ducking as well as other power moves. Once you've found that angle and you've found that apparent wind of where to throw the sail, now it's all about getting your weight as far forward as can physically go. Something that will help this is maybe sliding your back hand further down the boom, and we really want to get over that hump of the seesaw so that we can get the nose of the board down and initiate the rotation. As you're throwing the sail in the direction of the apparent wind, we want to be throwing our body weight up and forwards with it. It's really important that you throw the sail up because this is going to help you get a little bit more height, which is going to help you clear the fin and get on the upper side of that seesaw so that you can then initiate that rotation around the pivot point. A useful tip that really helped me when I was learning to Flaka is to try and get my head to follow my front hand. If I jump my head forward at my front hand, naturally everything comes onto my front foot and I end up going forward into the rotation. Like with all freestyle maneuvers, you're never doing a spin on the spots. You're always traveling forward throughout all of the rotation. If all of this is happening at the same time, you should be committed all of your body weight forwards and the board will naturally release and seesaw over the chop. If you're getting to the point where the nose of the board is initiated into the water and you're starting to rotate around it, now the last bit of it is the exit, and that is all the Upwind 360 technique. It's important to know that, again, a little bit like the Spock, the rotation isn't actually coming from the power in the sail. You're maneuvering the sail in the same way as an Upwind 360, but not using it. Really focus on keeping that sail tucked in close to you. Do not push out with your backhand, as this will stop the rotation. And just follow the motion of the board, looking over your shoulder now into the rotation so that you can open up and sail away. You should have less power than an Upwind 360, obviously because you are moving forward still. But remember, as you open up that sail, especially if it's very windy, you can still have a lot of power. So either release the backhand completely or just be prepared to shift your weight back and sit into that power. The next stage after you've learnt to Flaka and you're starting to get comfortable is to learn how to air Flaka. Now the air Flaka is actually exactly the same technique as the Flaka. However, you're throwing everything harder. You're throwing it higher and further forward, and your weight should be even more committed forward. Something that will help you with your air Flakas is actually taking off more across the wind. So you're actually looking for a little bit of chop that's coming a little bit more straight on at you. Although you can still do them downwind, this is also great practice for going for Pascos eventually if you get those nice little stunt ramps. Once again, guys, with all of these videos, if you have any crashes of yourself going for Flakas or you're struggling at a certain point, I've got my email address in the description of this video. Send it over to me and I will analyze it and break it down in a video so that we can all learn from it together. I hope you've learned something new from this Flaka tutorial. If you like this kind of video or you want to learn more freestyle moves, I've got plenty of other tutorials on the channel. Feel free to subscribe so you keep up with what I'm up to on the water, and I hope to see you in the next one.